The LA Kings lose to the Oilers, but may have suffered an even bigger loss. That and more on this edition of Locked On LA King.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Kings. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Kings fans, welcome to Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On LA Kings your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. We'd love for you to leave us a positive comment on Apple Podcasts if you're a fan of the show. And we are on YouTube. Please like and subscribe if you're enjoying this content. I'm Eddie Garcia, your host of Locked On LA Kings. I've worked in sports media for the past 30 years. 20 plus years at the Fox Sports Radio Network, also co-host of the Puck Podcast, a weekly NHL review show that's been putting out content for the last 17 years, and a passionate LA Kings fan for over 30 years. Today's episode is brought to you by Sleeper. Download the Sleeper app and use the promo code LOCKEDONNHL to get up to $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. Well, the LA Kings lose to the Edmonton Oilers 4-2 last night. We'll give you a recap. We'll talk about the pluses and minuses from that game in a moment, but much bigger news than that one game potentially, and that is the health of LA Kings leading scorer, Adrian Kempe. He was hurt after going down awkwardly in the final seconds of the game, took a face-off in the Oilers zone. He didn't take the face-off, but there was a face-off in the Oilers end, and he got tied up with an Edmonton player. The player's legs went into Kempe's legs, caused him to fall backwards awkwardly. It looked like he went to brace himself from the fall and was favoring his left hand or wrist as he left the ice. Just kind of a weird injury. Also, he had a towel over his hand, which is unusual. Usually when a player has a towel for an injury, that indicates that there's blood. I did not see any evidence of a cut. I didn't see at any point where a skate came close to his wrist or his hand. So that doesn't really provide any insight into what the injury might be. Afterwards, Kings head coach Jim Hiller said he did not have an update on Kempe. Today, NHL insider Darren Dreger posted on X, formerly Twitter, that Kempe, well, I'll just give you the quote. Adrien Kempe is heading to Los Angeles for a scheduled MRI tomorrow. That was the quote from Darren Dreger earlier today. He also added, extent of injury this time of year, always a factor in decision-making with the looming trade deadline, end quote. We'll get more into the possible ramifications of the Adrien Kempe injury coming up later in the show. But we will get into last night's game against the Edmonton Oilers. We'll start with what the actual game day lineup was. We gave you a projected lineup. It was actually a little bit different than what we thought. Jarrett Anderson-Dolan played on the third line with Pierre-Luc Dubois, Quentin Byfield, and Arthur Kaliev. And the fourth line had Blake Lizotte with Kaliev and Lewis. So, again, it was Jarrett Anderson-Dolan basically on the third line, not the fourth line, and Kaliev was on the fourth line and not the third line. Those were the only differences as far as the projected lineup we gave you going into the game on Tuesday night. As for the recap of the game, Kings jumped out to an early 1-0 lead in this one. Trevor Moore, his team leading 22nd goal of the season. Quentin Byfield and Andreas Englund with the assists. Moore snapping his 12-game goalless streak with that puck in the net. However, the Oilers would respond in the final seconds of the first period to tie it up at 1-1. Second period, Kings would reclaim the lead 2-1 on a goal by Alex Laferriere. Andre Kopitar and Matt Roy had the assists on that one. And then late in the second period, Oilers would tie it up with a power play goal, and we were tied at 2-2 after two. Third period, unfortunately, belonged to the Oilers. They would add two more goals. The Kings would not score again, and Edmonton would skate off with the 4-2 victory. As for the game stats from that one, shots on goal favored the Kings 40-31. As far as special teams, Kings were 0 for 2 on the power play. Edmonton was 1 for 3. Faceoffs did favor Edmonton 30-28. Block shots in favor of the Kings 15-10. And the hits actually favored LA 38-33. I thought the Kings played a very, very good first two periods. One late turnover by P.L. Dubois in the final seconds of the first period. And of course, it would be Connor McDavid who would be there to get that loose puck off of a pass attempt to Vladislav Gavrikov that he just didn't get much on it. and maybe didn't recognize who was around him. McDavid gets it, one pass over to Zach Hyman, their leading goal scorer, and it's in the back of the net. Then late power play given up by the Kings. Vladislav Gavrikov called for tripping, and the Oilers score immediately on their first power play opportunity. We knew that going into the game, the Kings' top-ranked penalty kill against the Oilers' top 5 power play unit was going to be a key for the game, and the Oilers obviously getting the advantage on that one, tied up at 2-2, but still in the third period, it's anybody's game. Unfortunately, Edmonton scored just a minute 25 into that third period, and the Kings were suddenly trailing for the first time, and it really changed the way the Kings were playing. It was no longer a defense-first game. Now they were pressing to find offense, and it took them out of what they were able to do really well, I thought, in the first 2 periods. And once they were trailing in the game, it just changed the complexion, and then Edmonton was able to get the victory as the Kings could not score a tying goal once the Oilers took the lead. Let's get a quote from head coach Jim Hiller on this performance by the LA Kings. He said, quote, "I thought we played hard. We used a lot of energy. First 2 periods, we didn't give them much at all. A little bit sloppy to start the third. We all saw that. And they had a nice goal to get in front of the net, shoot it. Fairly simple, but good execution by them. Then we tried at the end. The goalie made some saves. I thought Skinner played really well in the second half of the game." End quote. That was from head coach of the LA Kings, Jim Hiller, talking about the game against the Edmonton Oilers. And I think he pretty much echoed what I said. Good first 2 periods, but in the end, Kings didn't make enough plays in that third period to get the victory. As far as the pluses and minuses from the game against the Oilers, I thought this was a much better game all around for the Kings than they played in their previous game against the Ducks, but obviously it was against a much better opponent. If the Kings had played the 2 periods they did against the Oilers that way against the Ducks, that game doesn't even go, past regulation. The Kings win that one easily. But that wasn't the way it turned out. Trevor Moore getting a goal is obviously a plus. He also had a goal in the shootout against the Ducks. I said I had hoped that maybe that would get him going. And the Kings, if they're going to be without Adrian Kempe for a while, then they need Trevor Moore to get going. So him getting that goal obviously was big and maybe even bigger considering the circumstances and where the Kings are going to need to look for offense here, at least in the short term. I thought Vladislav Gavrikov looked much more comfortable playing with Drew Doughty in his second game in for Mikey Anderson. Thought he had a pretty solid game. And I thought the Kings did a lot of good things defensively as a team, especially containing Connor McDavid. That did include Jacob Moverari, who finished with a +1 in the game, and he did look solid defensively, including drawing some head-to-head matchups against Connor McDavid. And the Kings did have a pair of 5-on-5 goals. They did not have a 5-on-5 goal in their last 2 games, so good to see the Kings generating some offense 5-on-5. As for the minuses, obviously the injury to Adrien Kempe could be a huge minus. We'll talk more about that later. But the Kings allowed the Oilers to capitalize when they did have their few opportunities, while the Kings did not capitalize on some of their opportunities. Connor McDavid had been contained for most of the first period, but I mentioned the one mistake, the one turnover by P.L. Dubois, and he's there to pounce on it and make the Kings pay. The Oilers did not have a power play chance for most of the first half of the game, but then when they got the power play chance, they scored immediately. The Kings had a great chance with back-to-back power plays in the first period. It included 24 seconds of a 2-man advantage. The Kings got the puck to the net a few times. They had a couple of scrambling chances. They were trying to crash the net, find a loose puck, but in the end, they couldn't get it into the net and missed out on getting a key goal in a key moment. So again, Oilers take advantage of their opportunities, and the Kings did not. Bottom line, there were a lot of things to like about the Kings' performance for the first 2 periods, but it's a 60-minute game. It's not a 40-minute game. Hard to be angry about the effort and a lot of the execution for the Kings for the majority of that game, but clearly a disappointing result for the LA Kings with a chance to catch the Edmonton Oilers in the standings, and they could not do it. So the Kings, without Adrien Kempe, are right back at it tonight. Let's talk about who's going to replace Adrien Kempe in the lineup and more here on Locked on LA Kings, your team every day. The Kings are headed into the stretch run of the NFL season, looking to make a playoff push, but regardless of where the Kings are on the standings, you need to know that you could win big playing daily fantasy hockey on the Sleeper app. Sleeper is the official daily fantasy app of the Locked On NHL Network. Sleeper is our number one choice for daily fantasy sports, especially daily fantasy hockey, because with Sleeper, you can win 100 times your cash in daily fantasy hockey contests. All you have to do is pick whether players like Austin Matthews or Nathan McKinnon will record more or less based on Sleeper's projections for things like goals, assists, plus, minus, and more. You can even pick goalies and talk about saves. And it's not just about the NHL. You can also play daily fantasy hockey with the NBA as well. And you could win again 100 times. Bet on Sleeper. All you need to do is correctly predict the outcome of 8 player stats. You heard me right, Kings fans. You can win 100 times your money playing daily fantasy hockey with Sleeper. So start paying attention and nail your picks, and you can win big. Use the promo code LOCKEDONNHL, and you'll get up to $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That is LOCKEDONNHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details and locational availabilities. Hey, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now you can also find it on Amazon Fire TV. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today on Amazon Fire TV. Well, the LA Kings are right back at it tonight. No time to worry about what happened the night before or who's going to be in the lineup. It is game 2 of their 3-game road trip through Western Canada. They're still in Alberta, and they will take on the Flames in Calgary. Kings come into this game now with a record of 29, 18, and 10, still 4th place in the Pacific, still 7th place in the Western Conference, and still 14th overall in the NHL with 68 points. The Kings are 18, 8, and 4 on the road this season. However, this is the second of back-to-back games. The Kings have typically fared well in the first half of those games, not so good in the second half. Of course, they lost to the Oilers. Hopefully they can flip the script tonight and get the win in the second half of back-to-back games. Flames check in at 28, 25, and 5, 5th place in the Pacific Division, 11th place in the Western Conference, and 22nd in the NHL in points with 61. Calgary's 14, 13, and 1 at home this season, coming off a 6-3 road win in their last game against the Oilers on Saturday. Flames are riding a 3-game winning streak with impressive wins over the Jets, Bruins, and Oilers. Kings are 19th in the NHL in goals scored per game at 3.05. The Flames are 16th in goals scored per game at 3.12. LA is 3rd in the NHL in goals allowed per game at 2.65. Calgary 16th in the league at goals allowed per game at 3.07. The Kings' power play is actually up to 12th in the league at 22.7%. The Flames are 30th out of 32 teams in the NHL on the man advantage at 14.5%. Kings still have the number 1 penalty kill in the NHL, 86.2%. Calgary also top 5 on the PK at 82.8%. Individually, the Kings are led in points by Adrian Kempe, 51 points, 19 goals, and 38 assists, so he will not be available tonight for the Kings. With Kempe out, the Kings' leading scorers are Anze Kopitar and Kevin Fiala, each with 47 points, and Trevor Moore leads the team in goals now with 22 after his goal against the Oilers last night. Calgary is led by Nazem Kadri. He has 51 points, 21 goals, and 30 assists, and the Flames' leading goal scorer is Blake Coleman on the season. As for the 2 netminders, the Kings are going tonight with Cam Talbot after David Riddick got the start the night before. Talbot is 16, 13, and 5 with a 2.53 goals against average, a 913 save percentage. Now, after losing 10 games in a row, Talbot has won 2 straight, allowing a total of 2 goals in wins over the Penguins and Blue Jackets. The Flames are expected to go with Jacob Markstrom. He checks in with a 19, 15, and 2 record, 2.58 goals against average, and a 914 save percentage. His last start was a 3-2 overtime win against the Bruins, where he allowed 2 goals on 34 shots. This is the second of 4 meetings between the 2 teams this year. Kings won the lone meeting so far this season, 5-4 victory earlier this year. Quentin Byfield had a pair of goals. Trevor Moore got the game winner, and Cam Talbot was in net. He allowed 3 goals on 32 shots. Jacob Markstrom took the loss. He allowed 4 goals on 33 shots. The 2 teams will meet twice more after tonight's contest, again in Calgary on March the 30th and back in LA on April the 11th. As for the projected lineup for the LA Kings against the Calgary Flames, Obviously, with Adrian Kempe out for at least the rest of this road trip, the Kings will have to make some adjustments. Against Calgary, Quinton Byfield is expected to move off the third line and back up on the top line, joining Anze Kopitar and Alex Laferriere. The second line of Danault, Moore, and Fiala should remain unchanged. The third line could see Alex Turcotte inserted on the wing, joining PL Dubois and Arthur Kaliyev. The fourth line could see Jarrett Anderson-Dolan moving down from the third line to join Blake Lizotte and Trevor Moore. It's also possible we could see Turcotte and Jarrett Anderson-Dolan kind of flip-flopping from the projected lineup, where JAD would be on the third line and Turcotte would be on the wing on the fourth line. On defense, you've got Drew Doughty with Vladislav Gavrikov. It looks like Jacob Moverari will remain on the second pairing with Matt Roy. And Brandt Clark is expected to drop back into the lineup on the third pairing, but he'll remain on his natural side, the right side, not the left side where he played in the game against the Ducks. He'll be replacing Jordan Spence and joining Andreas Englund. And as we mentioned, Cam Talbot back in net for the LA Kings. As for some keys to the game for the Kings, obviously coming off a good 2 periods of hockey the night before, it's going to take a 60-minute effort in this one. Also, play your game for the LA Kings. It's still, you're not going up against Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl and those type of guys, but the Kings need to still play to their identity, and that is defense first, play good from the net out, and then find your goals when you have your opportunities. And I think the third key is who steps up with Adrian Kempe out. In professional sports, it's a cliche, but cliches stick around for a reason because they have some truth to them. And in professional sports, it is about who's going to step up. Things move on with or without star players. And I'm looking specifically at Quinton Byfield. I think we've all been thrilled with Q's progression this year and what we've seen from him. And at times he's looked spectacular. I think we've kind of all taken maybe the idea with Byfield that whatever he gives us is just kind of icing on the cake. But the numbers he's put up and the things he's done, at some point, I think you need to tell him, hey, you're not just along for the ride anymore. You're one of the leaders of this team now. And you need to take a step forward, especially now with Adrian Kempe out. And we need to rely on you to provide some offense. And you need to step up and make some plays and contribute statistically. So it's going to take a team effort. When you lose your leading scorer, you want everyone else to take their game to a little bit of another level, to take maybe a half step forward. But I think a guy like a Quinton Byfield, it's time to, if I'm Jim Hiller, I go to him and I say, hey, Q, you know what? You've had a great year. We're really happy with what you've done. But now in this playoff push, now moving forward, now we're looking at you to be one of the leaders on the team. And we're looking to you to take a step forward. So let's go tonight, get in there with Kempe out and make some key plays for the LA Kings. And hopefully we'll see that because, like I said, next man up, it's not going to be easy when you lose your leading scorer. Adrien Kempe is a key player for them, obviously playing on the penalty kill as well. But in the end, somebody's got to step up. Hopefully it's more than just one player, but I'm looking at Quinton Byfield, hopefully to make a step forward and be one of the reasons why the Kings win this game tonight. Real quick, as far as the Calgary Flames, very interesting. They are still in the mix for a wild card spot, and we'll detail that coming up in a moment, exactly where they sit. But they have given indications that they intend to be sellers at the trade deadline. They've already moved off some key pieces this season, and there are players like Chris Tanev, Noah Hannafin, and most notably their number one goalie, Jacob Markstrom, have all been thought to be pieces that could be moved at the trade deadline. So it's interesting. The Flames are in a weird situation where they're looking towards the future. They've kind of made that clear to the players, but the players, to their credit, have decided, hey, we're still going to play to win. We're still going to try and get in the playoffs and see what happens. So they're playing with some urgency. The Kings obviously are as well at this point, trying to hold on to one of those wild card spots. So should be a big matchup for the LA Kings tonight. And as I mentioned, the Flames have picked up some very, very good wins here recently for the Flames. So how does Adrian Kempe's injury affect how the Kings are now looking forward? We'll discuss that and more here on Locked on LA Kings, your team every day. Hey, today's show is brought to you by Camino Consulting. How would you like to get to know someone better in a matter of hours? than you could in maybe a year. Understanding one another helps to prevent small misunderstandings from becoming big ongoing fights. At providing more than 20 years of service to small and medium-sized businesses, helping management groups navigate conflict and onboarding new employees, Camino is offering a digital seminar for families and couples. Did your Valentine's gift of tickets to the game maybe not go over as well as you'd hoped? Well, get the couples and family online seminar for 25% off for the rest of the month of February using the discount code Locked On. Again, that is discount code Locked On for 25% off the rest of the month. And you need to use that soon because the month is coming to an end. Go to CaminoConsulting.ca, CAMINO, CaminoConsulting.ca, and mention Locked On when reaching out for a business seminar and receive your first 5 profiles for free. The LA Kings face the Calgary Flames tonight, 6 p.m. Pacific time, and you can catch every moment of the hometown broadcast of your LA Kings with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Just search LA Kings. Well, with the news of Adrian Kempe heading back to LA for that scheduled MRI, we obviously have to wait for the results of the imaging to find out whatever body part is injured and what the extent of it is. We believe it's a left wrist or a hand, but we have to know what the details are before we know what the Kings could or should do going forward. Right now, it is at least encouraging, I think, and I'm a guy who's a glasses half full kind of guy. I think it's encouraging that they need to get a more detailed look as far as what the result of that fall was. In other words, if it was a broken wrist, pretty sure they would know that pretty soon. I don't think they'd need to have to go get an MRI to determine if he had broken his wrist or not, or suffered maybe a broken finger or something like that. Now, it doesn't do a lot of good to speculate without knowing exactly what the injury is. But of course, the problem is with the way NHL teams give out injury information, it's hard to not have to speculate. Now, if it's a worst case scenario, if he's out for the season, that's obviously a devastating blow to the Kings. You lose your top scorer and likely your top pure goal scorer on the team. That is going to be incredibly difficult to overcome. Now, that obviously would affect the decision-making, maybe on a Victor Arvidsson as far as his timeline to return. That is, if he's available. Now, I've said previously that I would keep Arvidsson out for the rest of the regular season. But if Kempe is done for the season and Arvidsson is available later in the year, the way things are going, maybe you have to bring Arvidsson back into the lineup. Now, if Kempe goes on long-term injured reserve, that certainly could affect what the Kings could or would do at the upcoming trade deadline. That could provide them with more salary cap space to help to fill the void of losing an Adrian Kempe. Maybe you could even have Arvidsson and Kempe both held out until the playoffs, bring them both back, and have the roster upgraded with that more potential cap space, if possible. Of course, then there's also the idea if both of them can't come back. So there's a lot of things that are up in the air right now. None of it is great. But perhaps the Kings could, again, have more flexibility now if Adrian Kempe goes on LTIR before the trade deadline on March the 8th, and then have both of them come back for the playoffs. That would be a best case scenario, to say the least. But yeah, the Kings obviously are going to know the details of the Kempe injury. Whether they give us those details or not remains to be seen. But yeah, that definitely could affect the way the Kings are going to approach the deadline. If they know for sure that Kempe and Arvidsson are both out for the rest of the season, then that could also cause GM Rob Blake in the front office to decide this is a team that has no realistic hope of doing any damage in the postseason without Kempe, without Arvidsson, without them available. Maybe they decide that it's time to cut our losses, be sellers at the deadline, and focus on what the Kings are going to do for next season. So a lot of unanswered questions going forward. And once we get more details, we can kind of give more of an opinion on what direction the Kings might want to go in. Until then, obviously, the Kings are very much in a playoff race. Let's check the standings in the Pacific Division and the Western Conference playoff race as we go into tonight's action. And I haven't really brought up Vegas much, but I need to, because they sit at 71 points in second place in the Pacific. That's only 1 point ahead of the Oilers and 2 points ahead of the Kings. So second and third right now are pretty much in play between Vegas, Edmonton, and even LA. even with the injury to Kempe, the Kings are still right there, and there are points to be had. Hopefully that starts tonight with a win over Calgary. But again, Vegas, second in the Pacific, 71 points. Edmonton is third with 70, and the Kings are right now the first team outside of a guaranteed playoff spot in the Pacific. The first wildcard spot was 68 points. Then you've got Nashville right behind the Kings with 66 points. So those are your two wildcard teams for the moment in the Western Conference. St. Louis has 62 points. So do the Minnesota Wild. And then the Calgary Flames and Seattle Kraken each have 61 points. So it is very crowded right now with several games to go here in the latter part of this season as far as the battle for a wild card spot in the West. And of course, like I said, second, third, and fourth right now, very fluid in the Pacific Division as well. Games of interest to keep an eye on tonight. Golden Knights are at the Maple Leafs. Predators host the Senators. Blues are at the Jets, and the Wild host the Hurricanes. Also, you've got the Stars at the Avalanche. That's a big game for Dallas because right now that would be the Kings' opponent in the first round of the playoffs. So with a win tonight, the Kings could tie Edmonton in points for the third spot in the Pacific, but the Oilers do hold the tiebreaker, so LA could not overtake the Oilers tonight. And if the Kings lose in regulation and the Predators win, they could catch the Kings in points, but would not overtake LA for the number one wildcard spot because the Kings have the tiebreaker against Nashville with 2 games in hand on the Predators. So regardless of the outcomes tonight, the Kings will remain the number one wildcard team going into tomorrow's action. But of course, it could be much tighter as far as where they sit in relation to third place in the Pacific and where they sit as far as they're holding on to the number one wildcard spot as well. Also, with all that's been going on with the Kings, mentioned the playoffs, and Dallas is playing a big game against Colorado tonight. So again, the Kings right now, if the season started today, would be the number one wildcard team in the West and would face the Dallas Stars in the first round of the playoffs. But obviously things are very, very fluid when it comes to the LA Kings right now. Right now, it's just small picture. It's take care of business tonight against a solid Calgary team that's fighting for a playoff spot, and then we'll go from there. For you everydayers, those of you that listen and watch Locked On LA Kings every day, coming up on Wednesday's show, hopefully we'll have some new information to pass along regarding the injury to Adrian Kempe, and obviously we will recap the game tonight against the Kings and the Flames. Thursday, we're going to preview the Kings-Canucks matchup, LA's first game against the top team in the Pacific Division this season, and then on Friday, we'll recap that game and have another Kings fan feedback show. If you want to send an email for that show, the email address, as always, is lockedoneddie@gmail.com, EDDIE. If you're watching on YouTube, we'd love for you to post your comments in the comment section as well. Also, stay connected with the show on social media. You can follow us on X, Twitter, and Instagram. We are at Locked On LA Kings. I'm Eddie Garcia. Thank you, as always, for listening and watching this episode of Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Have a great rest of your day. We'll talk to you tomorrow. And as always, go Kings, go.